My name is Maya, and I'm 29 years old. 3 days after the most brutal tax season of my career, 81 hours a week, for 11 straight weeks, I drove home to find my key. Didn't work. My brother was standing in the doorway with his arms crossed, telling me I owed him 14 months of back rent. I looked at him for a long moment. Then I said, "Got it," turned around, got back in my car, and drove away. The next morning, he found a certified envelope taped to the front door, and his girlfriend started screaming so loud their dog started howling from inside the house. I watched from the end of the block, engine off, coffee in hand. If you've ever been used by someone you spent your whole life protecting, drop a comment and tell me where you're watching from. There is a specific kind of exhaustion that only comes from tax season. It's not just physical, though your eyes burn and your lower back aches from 12 hours in an office chair. It's the kind of tired that makes you stare at your own reflection and not fully recognize the person looking back. That was me in early April. I'd been pulling doubles since February, covering for a colleague who went on maternity leave while our firm was already 3 staff members short. I was surviving on gas station coffee and whatever I could microwave at my desk before the next client file landed on top of it. All I wanted was to go home. I don't mean a place to crash. I mean home, specifically, the White House on Clover Street with the green shutters and the old magnolia tree in the front yard that my grandmother planted before my mother was born. The house that smelled like cedar and old books. The house where I'd done homework on the porch every summer until I left for college. I wanted a long shower, a bowl of cereal, and about 10 hours of silence. That was the entire list. So when I pulled into the driveway at 10:45 on a Tuesday night, and my key slid in but wouldn't turn, my brain genuinely couldn't process it at first. I tried again, checked the key, tried a third time. Then the porch light clicked on and my brother opened the door. He was in sweatpants and a faded hoodie, holding a beer, looking like someone who had absolutely nowhere to be at 11 o'clock on a weeknight. "Hey," he said, like I was a neighbor stopping by uninvited. "My key doesn't work," I said. He shifted his weight. "Yeah, we changed the locks." Behind him, his girlfriend, Bree, appeared from the hallway in a silk robe that I didn't recognize, holding a mug with both hands like she owned the place. Which, as far as she knew, she did. "The thing is," my brother said, scratching the back of his neck, "Bree's pregnant. We told you that last month. And we've been here taking care of the place while you've basically been living at the office. So we sat down and figured out the numbers, and it's actually pretty fair that you start contributing. Back rent, 14 months, comes out to around $22,000. Plus, we'd need you to move into the small room upstairs. The baby's gonna need the master." He said it like he was doing me a favor, like he'd been crunching these numbers as a gift. I looked past him into the living room. My grandmother's armchair was pushed into the corner. There was a gaming console on the coffee table that hadn't been there before. A collection of half-burned candles on the mantel that were definitely not mine. "My name's on the mortgage," I said. "The mortgage, sure," he said. "But you're never here, and a house needs people in it, Maya. We've been keeping it up." "I see," I said. And I did see, very clearly. "Okay," I told him. Just that. Not angry, not hurt, just one flat word, like I was acknowledging a conference call agenda item. Then I got in my car, backed out of the driveway, and left. I called my college roommate, Dana, from the parking lot of a 2-4-hour diner 4 miles away. She answered on the second ring, which is the only way she knows how to answer a call, because she has always been the kind of person who picks up. "I need a couch," I said. "Obviously," she said, because she already knew about my brother. "You ate yet?" I hadn't. I slept in Dana's guest room on a mattress that sagged in the middle, and woke up with a crick in my neck and an absolute certainty about what needed to happen next. I didn't feel rage. I didn't feel betrayal, at least not in the active, burning way. What I felt was clarity. The specific clarity that comes when someone finally crosses a line you've been watching them approach for years. Because here's what my brother didn't know. What he had never asked about, never looked into, never thought to wonder. My grandmother didn't leave that house to our family. She left it to me. Not both of us. Not split down the middle. Not held in some shared trust. To me specifically, by name, in a handwritten amendment she filed with her estate attorney 8 months before she died. She told me about it the summer before her final diagnosis, sitting on that same porch with the magnolia tree, drinking sweet tea and watching the sun go down. She said she'd seen how my brother operated. She'd watched him borrow money from cousins and not pay it back. She'd watched him between jobs for 3 years while blaming everyone around him. She loved him, she said, but she didn't trust him with the house. So she gave it to me. I was 24 when she passed. I didn't say a word about the inheritance to my brother because my grandmother asked me not to, and also because I naively thought he'd never need to know. I thought he'd eventually build his own life somewhere else. I let him move in temporarily, 18 months ago, when he and Bree lost their apartment after he missed 2 months of rent. Temporarily. That was the word he used. I gave him the spare key. I didn't update the locks. I trusted him. He changed the locks on the house he didn't own and tried to charge me rent on a property with my name on the deed. I called the estate attorney that morning. She had represented my grandmother for 30 years and had the patience of someone who has watched a lot of family disputes play out in slow motion. I explained what happened. She was quiet for a moment. "Do you want to handle this formally?" she asked. "Yes," I said. "I'll have the paperwork ready by noon." The certified envelope I taped to the front door that evening contained a 30-day eviction notice, a copy of the original deed with my name on it, and a copy of the estate amendment my grandmother had filed. No note, no explanation, just documents, clean and factual and impossible to argue with. I parked at the end of Clover Street at 8:45 the next morning and waited. My brother is a late sleeper, always has been, but Bree is not. She was out the front door by 9, still in pajamas, checking her phone. She almost stepped on the envelope. Then she did step on it, backed up, picked it up, and stood there in the cold morning air reading it. She called my brother's name once, then louder. Then she screamed it. He came to the door, still half asleep, squinting, taking the papers from her hand. He read the first page, then the second. I watched his expression move through confusion, disbelief, and then something that looked a lot like panic trying to disguise itself as anger. He looked up and down the street like I might be standing on the sidewalk waiting for applause. I wasn't. I was at the end of the block in a gray sedan he'd never seen because I'd borrowed Dana's car. His dog, a beagle mix named Pockets, started howling from inside. I drove away before they could start making calls. They made calls anyway. My phone buzzed all morning. First my brother, 6 times. Then Bree, twice. Then my brother again. This time a voicemail. His voice cracking between yelling and something that might have been crying. "This is insane, Maya. You cannot do this. Grandma would never want this. Call me back right now." I didn't call back. There's something I should explain about my brother and me. We are 3 years apart. Growing up, he was the one who got away with things. Not in an obvious way, not in a way our parents openly acknowledged, but in the quiet, accumulated way of 1,000 small moments. He came home past curfew and got a conversation. I missed a single curfew and lost driving privileges for a month. He dropped out of his first semester of college and it was called a gap year. I deferred my own enrollment once to help cover our parents' medical bills, and no one noticed enough to even bring it up. I am not bitter about this in a way that controls me, but I am honest about it. When our grandmother got sick, I was the one who drove to her appointments. I was the one who sat with her through the bad weeks, learned what medications she was on, made sure the home health aide was showing up. My brother visited 3 times in 18 months. He came to the funeral. He helped carry the casket. And then he asked, at the reception, in the kitchen of the very house we're talking about, whether Grandma had left anything behind that he could use to get back on his feet. I said I didn't know yet. The estate was still being settled. That was true, technically. What I didn't say was that I already knew what she'd decided, and why. He moved in a year later under the banner of Family Helping Family. I did not ask him to contribute to bills at first because he was between jobs. Then he got a part-time position, and I asked him to chip in on utilities. He did, sometimes, inconsistently, with the energy of someone doing a favor rather than meeting an obligation. Bree moved in 6 months after that. She worked at a salon and had a pleasant enough personality if you weren't paying close attention. They seemed fine, occasionally annoying, mostly harmless. Then I started making real money. I got promoted at the firm. My salary jumped. I started putting away savings, talking about renovating the kitchen, mentioning to Dana that I was finally thinking about buying actual furniture instead of the secondhand stuff I'd lived with since grad school. I didn't say any of this around my brother, but Bree has ears and a memory, and she mentioned it once at dinner with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Sounds like things are really taking off for you," she said. My brother nodded like he'd been thinking the same thing. That was 3 months before the locks were changed. Looking back, I can trace the shift almost to the week. Suddenly, my brother had opinions about the house. He started mentioning things that needed fixing as a way of implying I was neglecting the property. He suggested, once, that it might make more sense for me to take a step back from the master bedroom since I was barely there anyway. Bree asked if they could repaint the second bathroom. I said I'd think about it. I was in the middle of the worst stretch of tax season, and I did not have bandwidth for any of it. I said, "Let me get through April and we'll talk." They didn't wait for April. The eviction notice gave them 30 days. On day 3, my brother came to Dana's apartment. I don't know how he got the address. I assume he asked our cousin, who has never once in her life kept a secret. He stood on the stoop with his hands in his jacket pockets, looking like a man who had rehearsed a speech and was now regretting the rehearsal. "Just talk to me," he said. I stood in the doorway. Dana had offered to stay, but I told her it was fine. "There's nothing to talk about," I said. "You have 27 more days. You're doing this because you're angry. I'm doing this because you changed the locks on my house and told me I owed you $22,000. We've been living there for over a year. That's not nothing. I never asked you to leave," I said. "I asked you to split utilities. You changed the locks." He rubbed his face. "Bree's pregnant. I know. You mentioned that when you told me I owed you rent. So, you understand we can't just—" "I understand that you need to make a plan," I said, "and I'm giving you a month to make one. That's more than you gave me." He tried a few more angles. He brought up our grandmother, said she would be ashamed of me. He said Bree had already told her parents about the situation, which I took to mean he was trying to build an audience. He mentioned his job, which had reduced his hours, and the baby, and how housing was expensive, which, yes, I know, I own property and have a mortgage. None of it moved me. Not because I didn't feel it, but because I had already decided that feelings were not going to be the deciding factor here. He left without a resolution. 2 days later, he posted on Facebook a vague, dramatic paragraph about how family isn't always who you thought it was and how some people show their true colors when things get hard. His high school friends weighed in with supportive emojis. Someone named Dave, who I've met exactly once, left a comment calling it a real shame. Bree posted a separate thing on her own page about being strong for the baby no matter what. She got 47 likes. I screenshot everything and sent it to the attorney. The attorney, for her part, had already been in touch with him directly by that point. She explained, clearly and without drama, that the house was legally mine, that the deed transfer had been properly executed and recorded, and that any attempt to contest the eviction would require him to claim a legal interest in the property that he simply did not have. He apparently told her that our grandmother had promised him the house verbally at some point. The attorney responded by producing the written amendment that said otherwise. He went quiet for a few days after that. Then came the letter on my car. It wasn't my car, it was Dana's car, which meant he'd been looking for me specifically. He'd either followed me or had our cousin tracking my location through some family group chat I'd forgotten I was still in. The note was handwritten this time, not typed, on lined paper torn from a notebook. It said that I was breaking up the family, that our grandmother would be heartbroken, that I was making a decision I couldn't take back. It asked me to reconsider for the sake of the baby, for the sake of us, for the sake of what we used to be. I sat in Dana's car for a long time after I read it. I'm not made of stone. That note did something to me, not because it was right, but because it was his handwriting. His terrible, cramped, all lowercase handwriting that I recognized from birthday cards and grocery lists he used to leave on the fridge when we were teenagers. That's the part they never tell you about these situations. It's not always the injustice that hits hardest. Sometimes it's the ordinary details that remind you that this is your actual brother, not a stranger, and that the person trying to extract money from you is the same person you once taught how to tie a bowline knot at summer camp. I folded the letter, put it in my bag, drove to the estate attorney's office. There was someone else there when I arrived, My mother's older sister, my Aunt Frances, who had been my grandmother's closest friend in the last decade of her life. I hadn't told her I was coming, but the attorney had called her apparently as a character witness of sorts. Aunt Frances is 71 years old, has no patience for nonsense, and once told a city council member to sit down and stop wasting everyone's time at a zoning meeting. She had driven 2 hours that morning. She hugged me first, which I didn't expect, and then she sat down and told me what my grandmother had said to her when she changed the estate amendment. She said she'd watched you your whole life, Aunt Frances told me, working twice as hard and getting half the credit. She said she was tired of watching that happen and she wasn't going to let it happen to her house too. I didn't cry, but it was a close thing. Aunt Frances also told me something I hadn't known. She said my brother had called her the week before, asking her to talk to me. He'd told her that I had surprised them with legal documents out of nowhere, that there had been no warning, that he was blindsided. He had not mentioned the part where he changed the locks. He had not mentioned the $22,000. She'd called him back after speaking to the attorney and asked him directly. He said Bree had handled that part. He said it had gotten out of hand. That's the thing about people like that, Aunt Frances said. The problem is always someone else's hands. The 30 days ended on a Saturday. I took the day off. I wore my good jeans and a clean jacket. I drove my own car this time, not Dana's. I pulled up at 10 in the morning to find 2 suitcases on the porch, and Bree sitting on the front step with her phone. She looked exhausted in a way that almost made me feel something. Almost. My brother opened the door when he heard the car. He looked like he hadn't slept much. He probably hadn't. I knew that feeling, had lived in it for months, would recognize it anywhere. We stood in the front yard for a long moment. We're getting a place in Riverside, he said finally. Month to month for now. Okay, I said. Bree's sister is helping us with the deposit. Good. He looked at me the way you look at someone when you're trying to figure out if there's still a door open. Are we done? Like as a family? Is that what this is? I thought about that. About all the years of covering for him, lending him money that came back inconsistently, showing up when he needed someone, staying quiet when I should have said something. About the locks and the $22,000 and the Facebook post. About our grandmother sitting on the porch with her sweet tea, telling me she'd seen what she'd seen. I don't know yet, I said, which was the most honest answer I had. He nodded once, picked up a bag. Bree came down the steps without making eye contact. They loaded the car in 2 trips, which told me they'd already moved most of their things the day before. Smart, actually. Maybe the smartest thing he'd done in this whole situation. When they drove away, I stood in the front yard for a while. The magnolia tree had just started coming in, pale yellow-green buds on the lower branches. My grandmother had planted it so that it would be blooming by Mother's Day. She had planned things in decades, that woman. She had known what she was doing. I went inside. The house smelled different, like their candles and someone else's laundry. There were scuff marks on the hallway wall. I didn't remember being there. The armchair was still pushed into the corner, but the structure of the place was intact. The bones were the same. The porch was still the porch. The magnolia was still out front. I pushed the armchair back where it belonged. I made coffee in the quiet kitchen. No one else's dishes in the sink. No background noise from a gaming console. No voices carrying down the hall. I sat down at the table and drank the coffee while it was still hot, which I realized I had not done in months. It's been about 8 weeks since then. My brother and Bree are in Riverside, from what I hear through our cousin, who tells me more than I ask for. The apartment is small. He's working more hours now, which I am genuinely glad about. The baby is due in September. I don't know yet what that means for us, whether I'll be an aunt who shows up or an aunt who sends a card. I'm thinking about it. Aunt Frances came to visit last weekend. We sat on the porch and had tea and watched the magnolia do what magnolias do. She brought a photograph of my grandmother at about my age, standing in almost exactly the same spot. I didn't know that photo existed. I put it on the mantle. The house looks like mine again, because it is. I still work long hours. Tax season doesn't take years off. But now, when I pull into the driveway at 11 o'clock at night with a cold coffee and receipts in my laptop bag, my key works. I go inside. I lock the door behind me. I sit in the armchair in the quiet and listen to absolutely nothing. No one asks me to pay for something I already own. No one moves my things without asking. No one makes me feel like a guest in my grandmother's house. She knew what she was doing when she gave it to me. And I think about that a lot. The way she looked at me on that porch and said quietly, like it was nothing, like it was the most obvious decision she'd ever made, "I want you to have this. You'll know what to do with it." I think she was right. So be honest with me. Did I handle it wrong? Was 30 days not enough? Should I have given him more time, more warning, more grace? Tell me what you think in the comments. And if this story hit close to home, subscribe, because there are a lot more where this came from.